The 311 Response Center is the main gateway to city services. As small as our population is, we do take a lot of requests. Most cities that have 311 systems, you'll find that more of their calls are question related and don't end up in service requests. Pittsburgh, I believe, is the complete opposite. The majority of our calls are going to end with a service request. Sometimes we'll get one call that will generate 25, 30 different requests.
I really believe that 311 is a great factor, probably in all cities, because if we didn't have it, then the public would probably have a harder time trying to contact these offices just on a personal level, because there's so much. So we do what we can to try to help in between, because sometimes it doesn't always have to go directly to whatever that department is, because if we can help, if we have whatever forms that need to be sent out, then that's one less step that someone has to, one less day that they have to wait for the mail to get their items and things like that. So I guess at the end of the day, as long as they're satisfied, then we've done our job.
Citizens can contact us a variety of ways. We have live operators. We've expanded our hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is exciting. Different hours, odd hours, feel free to call us and leave a message at 311. It answers 24 hours a day. And then we also have 311 postcards that we'll pass out at community meetings that you can fill out and send in. Those are postage paid. So if you have a group event and need some of those, please feel free to let us know. We also have a Twitter account, and our handle for that is @PGH311. And we can actually process service requests through that handle and send back your service request ID number. Through the years, we've been growing and building, and we're up to 11 staff now. And one of our most exciting endeavors at this point is we're finally getting new software. We're currently using something that was built in-house in the late 1980s, and now we're moving up to a new product. We're in the process of implementing it and hope to have full implementation by this summer or fall. So that's going to make a lot of great improvements to 311, the efficiency of the service we can provide, so we're very excited about that.
Twitter has opened up an opportunity for an entire new process to people who don't normally have an opportunity to reach out to 311. It's fast, it's monitored 24/7, generally replying to people between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. It can be challenging at times to respond to a certain person's needs with only 140 characters, but there's a few times where we have to send multiple tweets.
We're making our website more self-service, so people will be able to go in and find the answers to questions they need without having to contact us. It makes it a lot more convenient. We'll be building the knowledge base that goes along with that. For years, updating and putting more information in so that we can try to address everyone's needs.
This is the type of job where you have to have an open mind, have to have compassion, and you have to listen. Because you can easily not understand what someone says, and then it just doesn't end well. So we try to make sure that each person and their concerns, we make them aware that we are very serious about what it is that they're bringing to us, and that we want to help them, and we want to give them that feeling of it's not so much like a machine. I'm a real person when I answer the phone, and let me do what I can to help to assist you.
Hi, welcome to Pittsburgh. I'm Mayor Bill Peduto, and it's my honor to welcome you to our city. I can't be with you in person today. I'm up in Harrisburg and then over in Washington trying to do what all of us do on a constant basis, get enough money to keep the operations running. But I wanted to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you for the work that you do within your community to be able to do what is our core mission, taking care of people. And for so many people like myself, mayors, we always ask ourselves the same question: who are you going to call? 311. Hello? I don't have a cord. All right. Well, anyway, you know what I'm saying. You're the front line of getting things done, and it's an honor to have you here in Pittsburgh. Enjoy your time here. Get out there, see this city. If you see a pothole, you know what to do. You know who to call. But in the meantime, as you're going around this city, do one other thing too. Enjoy your time here in Pittsburgh. On behalf of the people of Pittsburgh, welcome to our city.
And I'm going to mention my mayor again because this is his second year in office, and it feels so great to be able to tell you that my mayor cares just as much about customer service as I do. And along with his investment in 311, he has brought in some really fabulous new colleagues, people I am so honored to work with. And one of those will be up next. That is Laura Meixell. She started out, what were you, 16? She was the youngest legislative aide to go to DC. She's been involved with Code for America. She's done a lot of fabulous things, and I'm really excited for her to talk to you a little bit about open data.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Wendy. So my name is Laura, and I know that I am your last speaker before lunch, and do not worry, I shall not keep you. So just to frame this a little bit, I wasn't sure sort of what people's experience sort of was with open data as a concept, as a movement, and so I tried to sort of frame this a little bit as an introduction. But what I'd kind of like to do is just sort of frame, what are some of the things that are going on in the open data world right now, and then what I'd like to do is just sort of show you a couple examples. I've sort of broken it down into 3 areas, which we'll talk about: transparency, partnerships, and using community as capacity are the 3 sort of areas that I'm going to talk about. And I've got a couple of examples, some from Pittsburgh and some from other cities, that I'm just going to sort of visit on the web. And then, after this presentation, I'll be happy to follow up with anyone who has any questions, and certainly to share this presentation if any of these links are something that you're interested in exploring further. So what is open data? So here's my little video clip. So this is a couple mayors. People here? That's your guy. We love Mayor Pete.
All right.
So this is Mayor Pete and Mayor Greg from Louisville. Are the Louisville people here? Hey! Mayor Greg, Mayor Pete, and there's a couple of other ones in here too.
All of this data belongs to the people. We created it while we were working for them. The challenge is to make it available, and not just available, but intelligible. It's not transparent if you just dump a giant, unintelligible, illiquid pile of data online. So we work really hard with trying to make it accessible and readable. We're proud to be the first city in our state, and we think the smallest city anywhere, to have an open data portal, because we don't think you have to be a huge city in order to be able to take advantage of machine-readable data and use that to come up with solutions.
A lot of people focus on internal innovation, so how do we work with Code for America, how do we use apps to improve the delivery of citizen service, and all that stuff is extraordinarily important as we improve. But more important, I think, is civic innovation, social innovation, of preparing people's mindsets or creating a platform where people can realize their human potential.
It's not flashy, but having the smartest sewers in the world, being the first city in the world to move our wastewater management into the cloud, has probably enabled us to avoid about $100 million in capital expense just by better using the infrastructure we already have and staying ahead of some federal mandates while we were at it. In this case, there was intellectual property being cooked up at the University of Notre Dame nearby, which it turns out could be applied to the case of South Bend. And by being willing to be that beta city, being willing to pilot and experiment with that new and somewhat untested technology, we were able to find great benefits, and we're cultivating a homegrown business, which I think will be part of the story of economic development in South Bend going forward.
We are right now working on a well-being index, and it's to build resiliency in the community. And by that I mean it's about wellness, physical health, but it's also about mental health. It's about social connectedness. It's about economic vitality. How do we find that out? Our resources are limited. We can funnel them, we can put them towards programs and challenges, but we need to know what those are. We can guess what they are, but if we have data, if we have metrics, if we have understanding of how people are doing and their well-being and where the need is, we can make better use of our government resources to address those issues going forward.
So we put a process in place called LouisStat that's all about working on the known problems that we have, reactive problem solving. If you're not careful in government, you can just react all day long because there's so many things happening, from public safety to solid waste to social services. Then we have dedicated resources for innovation. My private sector experience tells me unless you give dedicated resources to innovation or breakthrough improvement, resources just kind of get sucked into the daily work. In our emergency management system, every call that goes into 911 is treated as an emergency, but only 3% are true emergencies, right? So it's very costly. So how do we analyze those calls so that we can triage the non-emergency calls into a much more cost-effective solution? So we say, let's put a nurse on each shift. And that nurse takes the call and says, Mr. Jones, really, what we're going to do is send a taxi for you tomorrow at noon to take you to the doctor, right? So it's a $20 call as opposed to a $500 call of sending an ambulance there.
What if we learned that something in our utilities database about when water cutoffs are happening can be mapped onto our data about code enforcement issues or vacant and abandoned properties? What if it turned into an early warning system on the vacant and abandoned properties that we're trying to prevent as well as deal with?
We've distributed 500 asthma inhalers around the city with a GPS device on top of the inhaler so we know when and where people are using inhalers. And then we overlay data on that in terms of where did it happen, what time of day did it happen. Let's say what was the pollen count, what was the temperature, was a road closed, what were traffic conditions like. And so we can really understand the problem. And then you can overlay big data on top of that. What if we, for instance, expanded the tree canopy? Okay. What if we mitigated the traffic patterns? So you can start seeing the effect then on public health in this case. So how do we smartly marry the areas of digital solutions with public health? It could be public safety, it could be social services. So we just look at digital solutions as a way to really help us more deeply understand the problem and then come up with solutions at the same time by using other data sources on top of it.
I think perhaps the most important area where we're in the long run going to see benefits from open data and slicing and dicing data in creative ways is going to be economic development. We have deals put in front of us as a city that depend a lot on whether you believe certain kinds of numbers. And the reality is a city, especially a smaller city like us, doesn't always have the same kind of due diligence capacity as the people across the table from us. So even just being able to game out or estimate, if a developer's telling us that with X ROI and this many parcels being cleared for this purpose, we get at that tax rate this kind of income, and it would all be worth it in X number of years. We have a hard time proving that out on our own terms. Data could be the answer because you can automate a lot of that math and use some of the real world data that we have about what we know is going on in our city, matched up with some of the assumptions, and then use that to test some of the promises that are made.
Great. Let's go back to the slide deck, please. So I really like that video. I think that the mayors there did a great job of talking about some neat examples of ways that they have used data to improve work that they're doing in their cities. There are 3 areas of open data and civic technology that I'd like to talk to you about today. I've put them into these categories. We're calling it transparency, partnerships, and community as capacity. So let's go forward one, please. Okay, so here's our mayor again. That's me and our mayor and Councilwoman Natalia Rudiak and Policy Manager Matt Barron. This was the day that the city of Pittsburgh passed our open data legislation. It was about a year and a half ago. I really like this picture because I feel like the mayor and councilwoman look like they might be engaged in a rap battle in this picture. Just sort of the look on her face and the way that she's sort of holding herself there. I just really enjoy this particular photograph. It was in our local paper, which was the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But I'm going to talk a little bit about, and when I talk about transparency, I'm going to talk a little bit about what our process was for putting these policies in place in the city of Pittsburgh. So through the legislation, there were 3 goals that we had. The first was, as we called it, to set the default to open. So here in Pennsylvania, as in many, many other states, I'm sure including most of yours, there are statewide right-to-know laws, which dictate what is and is not public information. What we actually did in the city of Pittsburgh was to say that all information which is not explicitly stated by the state to be private information is eligible to be on our public data portal. So that's a pretty exciting thing, right? So instead of sort of saying only these particular data sets or in these areas are things that we're looking to share, instead what we want to do is set the default to open, which means that going forward we're going to be working on releasing pretty much everything which comes in tabular form, which we'll get into in a little bit more later in the presentation, right onto the website. We attempted to implement a lot of technical best practices in the way that we were doing this, how to make the data available in the kinds of formats that people wanted in, as well as documented in such a way that people can understand what they're looking at. And the third thing that the legislation does is to explain what our process is going to be for gathering consensus around what data sets we're going to share, how those are going to be formatted, and how we're going to publish them. So when we first wrote the legislation, we actually posted it online as a Google Doc. So this is a pretty simple technology. I bet a lot of you are aware of this technology, even if you don't have Google as your email platform, as we happen to in the city of Pittsburgh. Perhaps you've encountered this in your personal life. And what this platform allowed us to do was to put the text of the legislation actually online, and then allow anyone to come in and provide inline comments. Actually to say, okay, in this section you're talking about this, have you considered this? And it was a pretty exciting process to have. We had folks from our local community as well as sort of national and even international experts on government open data weighing in on our bill and the way that we were setting up our program, as well as interacting with each other through the application of the Google Doc. And so that was pretty exciting, and I think did a good job of sort of setting the stage for thinking about transparency. So the next thing we did after the legislation passed was we opened what we called the PGH Data Form. So the data form was basically a dedicated website that asked the question, what information that the city of Pittsburgh maintains would you like to see opened and why? And so we did that through our MindMixer account, now becoming My Sidewalk. I'm not sure how many of your cities might potentially be engaged with that as well. But that happened to provide a super easy way for us to pose that question and make it interactive. But I'm sure there's all sorts of other ways that could be done as well. And in the 6 months or so that it was open, we got 150 unique suggestions for different data sets that the city maintains, as well as over 600 interactions, because the way that the site was set up, it's kind of like Facebook in that you can like someone else's suggestion or make other comments. And so it really provided a pretty unique environment for people to weigh in on the kinds of information that they wanted to see, as well as sort of give us a hint as to what they were looking at. And we'll get into a little bit later some of our work around that. So these are 2 sites which I think fall under the sort of transparency umbrella that the city of Pittsburgh has been working on in the past year. There are 2 websites on that page, which maybe we'll get to take a look at. One of them is Fiscal Focus Pittsburgh, which is a website that we launched to help people explore our budget data, actually, and so it goes back to 2012, I believe. And so it provides some pretty interesting visualizations to see sort of where the money's coming from, through which tax revenue we're gathering that money from, what accounts it goes through, and then which department winds up spending it. So it's got a little bit of our contract information in there as well. But now this is so it goes. So that is and that's something that definitely citizens were looking for. You know, we get a lot of right-to-know requests around the budget, and so launching this website allowed us to provide that information to people on an ongoing way. So when people say, okay, I'm interested in this money, where's this going? We can say, actually, you can go ahead and look right at the website, manipulate the information however you like, and then download reports if that is what you're interested in doing. And the other example that I have on here is our Snowplow Tracker. So I'm not sure about the geographical representation of the folks that we've got in the room, but I'm pretty sure everyone who is in snowy areas can sort of feel our pain in providing information to the public about snow and ice control. As Wendy mentioned, I'm relatively new to city government, and I think that one of the things that has surprised me the most has been the citizens of Pittsburgh's insatiable desire for information about how the city controls snow and ice. They really can't get enough of it in any way, shape, or form. And so we learned that in our very first year. And in our second year, we're able to provide a number of views into our snow and ice removal and treatment procedures. And one of those things is a Snowplow Tracker. So what it actually does, and of course it's not on now, but it gives you a real-time look into where our snowplows are, as well as where they've been since the beginning of the most recent snow event. So you can see your road, you can see your route to work, and you can click on it and see when the last time it was treated for snow and ice. So something else I'd like to talk about in terms of open data is partnerships. So this is a quote which came from the director of one of our local neighborhood groups here in the city. The data will be for the 21st century what steam engines were for the 18th and electricity in the 20th. And this is something that we think about a lot on our team, and where we try to think about data and information as infrastructure, right? As the things that people use to communicate with each other, to exchange goods and services, and to truly coordinate. So one of the challenges that we have here in Pittsburgh is that there are actually 131 municipalities in Allegheny County. So that's bananas, right? So here's the county, and here's the city of Pittsburgh right in the middle here. And there's all of our other municipalities that are outlined. So this presents a number of challenges for public sector management. And I have a couple of examples that I'd just like to talk through a little bit. In terms of how we feel like open data is going to help to work on some of these coordination issues, which have sort of been really intractable intergenerational problems that we've dealt with in this region. So one of these issues is on regional land banking. So this is something that we have been very interested in here, right, to sort of come up with a central store of what our vacant and available properties are, both in the city as well as in some surrounding municipalities, to be able to say where some of our opportunities are, how can we strategically manage these properties, how can we sort of match up people who are interested in doing rehabilitations with the potential properties that really are going to fit their needs, and how can we do that in a regional way. So we're really excited about using some of our regional coordinated open data to help solve some of those problems. Another example of a problem that pays no attention at all to municipal borders is our sewer issues. Again, so I know that this is something that a lot of other communities face as well. Our Allegheny County's watershed area, the intergovernmental body is referred to as ALCASAN, is actually under a $3.6 billion consent decree from the EPA to fix some of our combined sewer overflow issues. If this is not something that your community faces, congratulations, but this is a major, major problem for us. And obviously something that requires a lot of coordination between municipalities around how sewers are being treated, around how maintenance is being done, as well as how some green infrastructure components, such as rain gardens, such as increasing the amount of permeable surface in areas where it's really going to make a difference for that water flow are the kinds of things that really need to be coordinated between municipalities. We understand that a lot of these things sort of require some pretty high-level political will to get done, but we really believe that it's that information infrastructure at that bottom layer to be able to tell where our opportunities are, where our assets are, where our challenges are, truly in the area that the problem is presenting itself, and not where, around the borders of these sort of artificial borders of the municipality. So this is a little bit of a complicated slide, but I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of what we're doing here in Pittsburgh. So what we're actually building, in conjunction with the University of Pittsburgh, is we're calling it the Regional Data Resource Center. So the university is actually going to host this platform and the website where all this data will be shared, as well as provide a lot of support for helping people connect, for doing trainings and technical support, and sort of building communities around these different sorts of data groups by policy area. So what we see is the data center is the central platform, and governments providing some of their information, as well as nonprofits who have information that they want to share, neighborhood groups, community development corporations, really whoever sort of has information in the public service that they're interested in bringing into the community, as well as universities. So we're blessed here to have a number of really high quality research universities, and several of which have some really neat projects going on where they have data which would be better if other people could build on it. There's a lot of sort of sensor projects going on right now, environmental sensing, which, if you think about the example that Mayor Greg Fisher used in Louisville, where they were talking about the asthma work, you think about all the sort of different layers of information that were used in that analysis. We feel that a lot of the information that's held by the universities could help support those things. So then it's all held in the middle here, and then on the other side of this diagram we have the users. So we've got governments and nonprofits using the data for management, as the mayors so eloquently explained to us on the little video. We've got citizens and media having access to the data to increase those sort of transparency aims that I talked about a little bit in the first section, as well as creating some new applications, which we'll talk about a little bit later, as well as the university component. So I'm not sure if it'll work out given some of our technical difficulties here, but I've got some links to a couple different studies which were done mainly on 311 data to sort of show, in some cases, some predictive work that can be done to actually decrease problems before they happen, as well as sort of some academic studies that help us to understand our communities better based on the transactional data held by municipalities. So on these sort of partnership vein here, I wanted to just give a couple of examples of some of our community groups local to the Pittsburgh area who are interested in data coming from the city to further their aims. So, we really see ourselves both with the city as well as at the Regional Data Center at the University of Pittsburgh as sort of creating these communities of practice between these NGOs that are doing this work, often very similar work in slightly different neighborhoods or in different communities, and beginning to help them see how they can use data to do more evidence-based work toward each of their individual missions. So we have some partnerships examples here. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't. Okay. Lots to Love is a great little website which was built by one of our partners, an organization called GTech. And what Lots to Love is it actually maps all of our vacant residential lots throughout the city, and then provides a platform for residents to find out where they are, what is the legal status of that lot, who owns it, what would be the procedures that they would have to go about if they wanted to do a community project in that space. If they wanted to do a garden, if they wanted to build a playground, if they wanted to do whatever it is that their sort of project is, it helps them understand where those opportunities are and how they can go about doing that, as well as provides a platform to say, oh, I want to do this here, and then you can send it to your neighbors, get some feedback, gather interest. And of course, built on open data, because built on our vacant lots and our assessment files. The other example that I was going to talk about there is Intersections, which is actually a site that was done by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, our local newspaper. which helps to show where car accidents and pedestrian and bike accidents have happened in the city. Again, based on that police data, but sort of really gives us a good idea of where there might be some mitigation opportunities for our roads and streets department, as well as city planning, particularly our bike and pedestrian coordination. And then the final aspect of open data that I'd like to talk about is what we call civic technology. So civic technology is technology in the public service, basically, is what that means. I'd like to introduce you to the concept of the Code for America Brigade. Anybody know what that is? Code for America Brigade? Familiar with them in your town? Some folks? Awesome. Okay. So brigades kind of take on some different characteristics in different communities, but in general, the brigade program is a part of Code for America. They have a bunch of different programs that sort of fall under that umbrella. But what the brigades are basically volunteer groups of people who are technologists in their private lives, often people who have private sector jobs in technology, who want to do skills-based volunteering. Basically, they want to build applications for citizens to use, generally on top of open data, but not always, that will then serve their greater community. So they're either doing that, or sometimes brigades focus more on sort of helping existing nonprofits and community groups work with technology to further their missions. So, I think that this kind of movement offers a lot of opportunity to those of us in government who, as we all know, sort of have very limited capacity in a lot of ways, especially sometimes when it comes to technology. And so sometimes these volunteer groups can be really, really helpful in getting us to have the applications that we want to have, as well as exposing us to new skills and processes and products that we might not have known about. So just two projects from Pittsburgh that I'll share. So one is our police blotter. So you see on the right there is the way that we were publishing our data. So every day the police were publishing a PDF of all of the incidents of crime which occurred the day before. So that PDF is useful, but really, are you going to look at it every single day? How are you going to be able to think about your neighborhood, your community, your kid's school, whatever it is that's interesting to you, can be pretty hard to discern from looking at just daily PDFs. So we actually had one of our developers in our brigade, what's called scrape those PDFs, create a database of all those incidents, and then build a map whereby anyone can go on and filter and look at their neighborhood, zoom in and out, look at different types of crime, and sort of really explore that information in a much more interactive way. The second thing that I'll talk about is our PGH Street. So, hey, 311 loves PGH Street. Can we get to PGH Street? No. Okay. So what that is a little website that more of our volunteers built. So previously, if you lived in the city and you want to know what day your trash and recycling are going to get picked up, we do opposite week recycling here, so it's a little bit complicated. Obviously, it depends on where you live, but it's got something to do with your zone, but also your route. It's a little bit complicated. So previously, the only way to find out would be to call 311, and then they would have to look it up in a giant book, or with all these printouts of pages and pages of addresses, and it was not great for them to be able to do that. So now we have this app where you can actually go online, look up your street address, and then not only will it tell you exactly when your garbage and recycling pickup will be, it will also tell you yard waste and other special collections, and it'll send you a text message or an email if you sign up in order to be reminded. So this is an application that I personally love and use every week, and was recently pointed out to me that not only can you sign yourself up for text messages, you can sign up your husband, your teenage children, your roommate's boyfriend, whatever you got, in order to receive those reminders to go ahead and take that trash recycling out. And what it also does is gives you a little bit of visibility into what our recycling rules are here in the city in a way that's a little bit more dynamic than the previous handouts that we had. So this site unfortunately isn't going to be too great. I was thinking I would walk you through some of these things, but I can send this out later. Just a couple of examples of specifically 311 open data and the way it's being used in some places. I think the predictive rat gating in Chicago is one of the things that people in the open data world talk about a lot. Actually, it was with some researchers from Carnegie Mellon who were able to come up with an algorithm to actually predict where rodent calls would be coming into 311 based on the sort of environmental predictors, frankly, that you would expect. What is it? Debris, abandoned properties, garbage, the kinds of things that create good homes for rats. And so they were able to taking some of these other calls that weren't explicitly rodent related, make recommendations on where their Department of Animal Control would put out baiting, and they were able to significantly decrease the overall number of rodent calls that came in through the city. So that is just sort of a beginning example, I think, of the kinds of things that could be done with open data and analytics going forward. And I think that 311 is an incredibly central and important component to be able to make this happen. Thank you.